everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Rachel Ray, and today we are doing another diamond painting deep dive UFO edition. This is episode 3 with Mr. Ray. Say hi, Mr. Ray.
Hi, how's it going?
And we are coming back to talk about the history of the UFO.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and go through it chronologically, you know, and you can kind of see. We can talk about kind of changes in the form that they take, how people are witnessing it, that sort of thing, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if you are just joining us, please check out the previous videos in the playlist that is just linked up above. If you have questions about the diamond painting that I'm working on or about diamond painting in general, I'd welcome you to check out the links in the description box to find everything that you need that I'm working with today. We are working on Cauldron of Myrrh by Diamond Art Club, and it is stunning. Perfect for this time of year. I hope that you're doing well, and let's just jump right into it. Let's get in that rabbit hole.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about Foo Fighters and
the band,
the popular aerial phenomenon from World War II. And Foo Fighters are really like, they're the start of the kind of modern UFO craze, you know?
Okay.
And they kind of start basically at the kind of halfway through the war there, like in 1942 really is when they really ramp up.
Are they fighting Foo?
No, it's...
Like Fooey.
It's actually from, I think Foo
propaganda
is like a Scandinavian word for fire or something like that.
Ah.
And the manifestations of these is that they are balls of light. And they will basically play around with aircraft that are in the sky, you know? They're quite ubiquitous during World War II, and they're actually incredibly well documented, you know? Which is different from a lot. Like, a normal thing of UFO stuff is that someone will come out in the 80s or 90s or 2000s and they'll be like, oh, I have all these documents from the past, you know? But whereas with this, there are in fact serious records, you know, that are contemporaneous to the time and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the whole Foo Fighters thing really takes off on February 25, 1942. And I guess it's this incident called the Battle of Los Angeles. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
The Battle of Los Angeles? No.
Yeah. The Battle of Los Angeles is this event that took place, like I said, on the 25th of February 1942.
Okay.
And what it is that a number of kind of these lights appear in the sky over Los Angeles, and it causes a blackout of the city. Like, the city's power grid goes down, and like at least there's quite literally up to 1 million people that witnessed this. It took place over a number of hours that night. Mm-hmm. It's basically the whole of the West Coast is on high alert, you know.
Okay.
America has just entered the war on two fronts in this case, you know, both in the Pacific off the West Coast and in Europe. But obviously they're more concerned about the West Coast because
it's California.
Because it's California, and because of incidents that had been happening, like kind of, you know, obviously there's Pearl Harbor is a big one.
I was just gonna say,
yeah, and there's other incidences as well, like where kind of crazy ideas that might even play into modern stuff, where like the Japanese are attaching incendiary bombs to balloons and sending them up on kind of prevailing winds to wash over the West Coast and stuff, and everyone's on high alert, you know. Yeah. And it's all really weird. So these lights appear.
The aliens are interfering to stop us from going to war with each other, kind of thing.
I mean, I think we're probably going to get into the stuff about nuclear weapons and nuclear power and the connection to the kind of phenomenon, as they call it. But anyway, this is a pretty well documented thing. Like, they started basically firing anti-aircraft shells at it. They what would you say? Like, they fired about 1,400 anti-aircraft shells at this thing.
Yeah, because they thought that it was
enemy aircraft, but they're moving way too fast, and also they're glowing balls of light, you know?
Yeah.
Loads of houses, like several houses and buildings, end up getting destroyed. 6 civilians are recorded as having been killed in the incident. Yeah, so officially the Air Force and the Army, like basically the American military, has statements in the newspapers about how this was an enemy action and that it was designed that they were using some kind of weird thing like kites or balloons to expose where the anti-aircraft guns are, etc., etc. You know. So a huge part of this as well comes with the advent of the Freedom of Information Act of 1967, which is where you can basically request public documentation on stuff, you know? And this FOIA Act is, like, it's huge in all different, like, it kind of blew the lid off journalism and everything, you know? So basically they tried to FOIA all documents that the government had relating to the Battle of Los Angeles, and the government said that they literally have no claim of this event ever happening, even though there are newspaper articles from the time where they make statements about it. But they literally have no documentation about it, which is suspicious.
Very.
Yeah, so that's basically the start of the Foo Fighters thing, you know? And I guess what you're looking at here is that now there are lots of planes in the sky doing sorties and stuff like that, you know? Like it's 1942. As well, during World War One, or during World War Two, they invent radar, you know? Like all of these things get invented, and that's what leads to an uptick in these incidents. And I think as well, people were more likely to say things, you know? Because there's something up there, I don't know what it is, you know? So it gets reported. So there's loads of documentation on these. Like, the next day on February 26, 1942, there's this Dutch cruiser called the Trump, and it's in the Timor Sea. And it sees this large illuminated disc approaching at terrific speed. The object circles above the ship for 3 or 4 hours at an estimated speed of 3,500 kilometers an hour. Basically, the officers on board, they record it, they report it to the authorities, and it just takes off after 3 or 4 hours of circling the ship. Then in March of 1942, a flight crew over the Zuiderzee, which is, you know, in Holland, they see an luminous orange disc, and it follows the plane for a couple of 100 yards. The tail gunner gets freaked out, and he starts shooting at it, and it takes off at about 1,000 kilometers an hour.
Whoa.
These are all reported. Like August the 12th, 1942, a U.S. Marine sergeant in the Pacific saw a formation of about 150 objects which are just balls of light, and they're basically doing maneuvers over his position.
Altogether.
For a protracted period of time. That's what he reported. He said it was, quote, the most awe-inspiring and frightening spectacle I've ever witnessed in my life. August 29, 1942, this Army Air Corps control tower operator called Michael Solomon, he's in Mississippi, and he sees 2 reddish glowing objects descend and basically hover, accelerate, speed away, all this kind of thing. And he's in in kind of an Air Force flight training school.
Interesting.
So, I mean, they're the ones I've listed because they're all so close together in time. But basically, you can go on. There's loads and loads and loads of reports of these things, you know, and they're all kind of the same reports. You know, it's by flight crews or people related to flight crews that are on the ground or in naval vessels, and basically they're seeing these kind of glowing, often orange, sometimes white balls of light, sometimes other colours as well.
Great balls of fire.
Yeah, and they basically do manoeuvres and mess around with them and then shoot off at terrific speed, you know?
Yeah.
Like in March 1945, in the Andalusian Sea, which is the Bering Sea, 14 sailors aboard a US transport ship see a dark sphere rise out of the water and follow a curved trajectory away from their ship. Let's see. Then, so basically these reports keep continuing, you know? Then on August the 20th, there are hundreds of reports, but the last significant kind of one is on August 28, 1945, there's the 5th Air Force Intelligence they're specialists from the 5th Air Force Intelligence Grouping, and they're on board a C-46, and they're flying out of Tokyo. Or they're flying into Tokyo kind of in advance of the occupational forces arriving. As the plane is approaching Iwo Jima, they're at about 10,000 feet. They see these three teardrop-shaped kind of objects that are glowing, brilliantly white, and they come in, they start following the plane along on a parallel course. Then suddenly all of the instrumentation on the plane starts going crazy. The objects bank away, and the plane basically falls out of the sky.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's kind of the crack. So that's the last kind of major report of Foo Fighters.
Now, so that term, does that mean those specific events at that time? Because there are events like that after.
Yeah, I mean the glowing orange and white kind of orbs and stuff like that are a very common theme or common report.
I've heard it so many times where people would report like glowing orbs and multiple ones, like not just a couple, but hundreds of them or dozens of them.
Yeah.
So would we call those Foo Fighters as well? Or would we just talk about that time around World War II?
I mean, yeah, it's this time around World War II. I think it's the pilots that were flying and experiencing this that really came up with the name.
Okay.
I think that Foo Fighter is, I believe, Foo is the Scandinavian word for fire or something like that, maybe in one of the Scandinavian languages or something.
Yeah, you were saying.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and I didn't think about that. Of course, during wartime, they would be reporting these things because, you need to report everything as being a potential threat. But nowadays, if you reported that, people might think that you're a bit, loopy or something.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. Because, even at this time, in, 1942, they didn't particularly have a conception of...
Right.
Of a UFO as how we would conceive of it now,
Yeah.
It was just Sergeant, I was up at flying over whatever, and we saw this, me and
because the technology was new.
Yeah, exactly. And you would file a report about it.
Yeah.
Your incident report or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are quite literally hundreds of these incident reports, and it might even come back to what Ryan Graves was saying about pilots, commercial pilots particularly, reporting stuff to him but never saying anything to their employer or anything like that, because Delta doesn't want to hear about things buzzing you from 80,000 years, allegedly buzzing you from 80,000 feet. So I suppose the important thing to note as well about the Foo Fighters is that all the time the media was reporting on them, they were reporting them as some kind of, super weapon that the Germans were developing, or, that basically this was a real terrestrial thing that humans were doing. They never mentioned anything about UFOs or anything like that, That's
the conception wasn't there.
Yeah, the conception of it wasn't there. Exactly.
Or it wasn't mainstream enough.
It wasn't mainstream enough, no. Do you want to talk about ghost rockets?
Yeah, let's talk about ghost rockets.
Ghost rockets. Ghost rockets is another phenomenon that happened during the 40s, and this happened after the war. So it begins in 1946, and ghost rockets are mainly in Scandinavia. So because it's mainly in Scandinavia, a lot of the conception of this is that it's some kind of thing that the Ruskies are developing. Do you know? It's something that the Russian military are developing or something like that. But anyway, let's talk about them. There's various different descriptions of these, but they're different from the Foo Fighters. Sometimes they're described as kind of Foo Fighter type objects, but then sometimes they're described as actual real physical mechanical objects.
Okay.
Which I think is quite interesting. This mainly happens in, as I said, Scandinavia. So kind of Sweden is one of the biggest centres for it. But then there's loads and loads of reports from Finland, Norway, and Denmark, and there's even several reports from Greece. It spreads to the rest of Europe as well, but you never get the same amount of reports that you get as you get in Scandinavia. You know, basically what it is the first report of it was on May the 24th, 1946, and it's about 2 a.m. and several Swedish witnesses say that they saw this wingless cigar-shaped object, and it was about 300 feet above the ground, and there was bunches of sparks coming out of the tail of it, and it was basically moving kind of slow enough. Certainly slower than you would have to go to maintain height, you know what I mean, if you were a rocket or whatever.
It's a Tic Tac in trouble.
The description is of a Tic Tac, but you know, this one has like a rocket, like there's sparks coming out of the back of it, like it has a physical propulsion system, you know?
Yeah.
Which the other Tic Tacs don't, they just move, you know? Like I think they technically go, oh well, they don't have control, what do they call them? Control surfaces and no means of propulsion and stuff like that. So these continue, yeah?
Yep.
Like, my famous notes here now. These continue. So May 24th is the first ones, you know? On May 31st, there's another wingless kind of cigar-shaped thing spotted. And the reports start coming in thick and fast after that. And by July the 11th, 1946, there's actually a report from an American diplomat at the American embassy in Stockholm. Mm-hmm. And he says, and I quote, one of the objects landed on a beach near Stockholm. It, without causing any damage, according to the press, fragments are now being studied by the military authorities. If the missiles are of Soviet origin, as it is generally believed, their purpose might be to politically intimidate the Swedes. So this is literally a document from an American diplomat saying that one of these has been reported as landing. There are, I mean, it's not even funny how many of these reports are. Like, it kind of takes on the feeling of like mass hallucinations, or not mass hallucinations, but mass, what would you say? Like within the space of about 9 months, there's 1,100 reports.
Wow.
Do you know? Like, it goes
like a fear response kind of thing.
Not even, yeah. What am I trying to say? It becomes a thing. Like, it becomes a big thing. You know, people are seeing them everywhere. What is it like? Yeah. So basically, you just see them everywhere. On the 25th of July, 1946, Swedish Defence Forces staff spoke to the newspapers and said they are meteorites in every single case. They are meteorites in every single case is a theory which can be rejected without further ado. On August the 15th, the Swedish authorities disclosed that they came across fragments of metal up to 3 inches long with mysterious letters on it. They said this in the newspaper. On August the 22nd, Swedish defence staff announced that they had obtained radar results and they would be able to identify the source and nature of these rockets.
And let me guess. Not too long later, they go missing.
I have no idea. It's just that they were like this all happens really quickly, like, you know. August 29th, the American embassy in Stockholm again sends a message that it's marked top secret, saying while over 800 reports, this is August 29th, the American embassy in Stockholm sends another memo, and it's sent with a top secret stamping on it. And while over 800 reports have been received and new reports are coming in daily, Swedes still have no tangible evidence. So they're kind of going back on what they said about the recovered stuff from the thing. Full details of the report thus far received have been forwarded to Washington by our military and naval attaches. Our own source is personally convinced that some foreign power is experimenting with Sweden. He guesses it is Russia.
Yeah.
which seems kind of, seems kind of fair enough, to be honest, you know.
At that time, yes.
Yeah, but I guess, I suppose the important thing to remember is that this is, there's a sense of hysteria about what's going on here, you know? Like, the reports start in May 1946, and basically they finish more or less by the end of 46. But when they finish, there's 1,100 reports logged. Like, that's several reports a day, you know?
I wonder if it's easy to look at the details now and say, well, this thing may have happened and it could have been UAPs, but then because of what was going on, they just decided to turn it and make it propaganda.
Yeah.
Because it would be convenient. And instead of creating mass hysteria over something they don't understand at all,
Yeah.
They would just use it to blame Russia and whatever. I mean,
I think one of the things about, do you know, it, like I said,
that's where my mind went.
it just became this hysterical kind of thing, you know? And it, especially where it happened, kind of Scandinavia and stuff. I mean, you know, they have like the Aurora Borealis and stuff like that up there, you
They
know?
do, yeah.
Like unusual stuff in the skies. But I guess, yeah, it kind of gone crazy. The other thing of note is that, like, in kind of late, in late 1946, Greece and kind of Macedonia, that area, started reported seeing them as well. But there's only a couple of incidences there, and there's a guy called Dr. Paul Santorini, who's kind of like a physicist. He kind of had worked on radar and kind of guidance systems for missiles and stuff, you know. Basically, they started seeing them over it, and they contacted him because he has experience in that sort of thing, radar, missiles, that sort of thing. And he was in Greece at the time, and the Greek government basically hired him to investigate. And he said that he basically got together a team of scientists, and they went to visit the site, and, quote, before we could do any more, the army, after conferring with foreign officials, ordered our investigation stopped.
Yeah.
And that's the only real notable event from this as well. Starts in May, it starts to taper off by September, and yeah.
It's like a bad dream.
Well, the other thing as well is that there's an official report from the Swedish government, and it's dated December the 1st, and it actually states that approximately 100 impacts have been reported, together with fragments from about 30 of these recovered. All have been investigated by the Defence Research Institution, and it has been impossible to make certain that any of the objects originated as parts of projectiles or rockets. They have generally been attributed to other sources.
Other sources.
Yeah, I mean it's just strange.
So they're not saying. So they're saying that it wasn't a rocket, but they're not. It's kind of like, for me, it all sounds like half truths. You know, like the non-human life or non-human whatever. They're not saying the whole thing. They're telling as much as they need to tell for you to go, oh well, okay, it's not Russia.
Yeah.
Or it's not this.
Well, I mean, they've. I guess the thing about it is that, like, that's directly a document from the Swedish government. It was actually classified up until 1983, and then obviously someone dug it out of the archives, you know. But that's actually a document where they say that there have been approximately 100 impacts, and they've recovered material from 30 of them, and that the material isn't necessarily, they can't identify it as a part of a rocket.
Right.
Then there's other ones, like the one from the...
They're not saying it's not man-made.
Oh no, they're not saying it's not man-made.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
they're not saying that it's not man-made. They're just saying that it's not a rocket.
Yeah, and and they understand these as physical objects. Like they're writing like these are real physical objects that are there.
Yeah.
You know?
That are tangible.
They're tangible, real things.
Real things.
Maybe the Russian military are building rockets or...
But they just said it wasn't a rocket.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. They can't identify them as parts of rockets. The other thing as well, when you go to read up on kind of the reports, that often they don't move at all like rockets, you know?
Right.
Like they're just trundling through the sky. But any descriptions of them, they're either glowing balls of light or they are these cigar shapes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I guess that's in terms of UFO stuff, the Foo Fighters and these ghost rockets are kind of the first step before humanity starts to conceive of these things as otherworldly.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that really kicks off with Kenneth Arnold's sighting near Mount Rainier in 1947, which basically culminates by the end of 47 with the Roswell incident.
And then the popularization of the mythos of it.
Yeah.
In pop culture, in what would you call that? Pulp fiction.
In Pulp Fiction, yeah, and pop culture, yeah. And I suppose what the difference here is that this has the same kind of hysteria, you know, where people are seeing things and reporting seeing the same things, you know.
Yeah.
All over the country, and they read about it in the newspaper, and then they go out and they see one, you know what I mean? And that's basically what takes over in 47 with Kenneth Arnold, and that's kind of really where we come to the modern conception of what this aerial phenomenon is about. And that's what we will talk about in the next one.
I was just about to ask you.
Yeah.
What does our next episode look like?
Our next episode looks like what went down in 1947, and just basically the absolute hysteria that began to get wrapped up in the mythology, you know, and that these aren't an adversarial power. They're a non-human intelligence. That's basically the shift that takes place in the next one.
Shift from, could this possibly be our threatening neighbors, to this doesn't seem like anything that's possibly on Earth.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. There's something otherworldly about it, yeah.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you all for watching this video. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please leave any comments that you might want to leave down below, any questions you might have down below. And again, as I said, all the links are in the description if you'd like to check out other videos or playlists. In the meantime, we'll see you next week for another episode of Diamond Painting Deep Dives, the UFO edition. Take care and stay safe out there. Bye!
Bye, everybody!